It's good to know. Outside of Atlanta, what are you hearing about any other teams that might be interested in acquiring AD?
Yeah, today I found something very interesting. I came on last week and I told you about what the Warriors are looking for a big man, rim running big man, protect the paint, lob threat. I was told they're contemplating making a case to acquire Anthony Davis as well.
Chris Haynes just dropped a bomb that has the entire NBA world scrambling to figure out what's happening. The Golden State Warriors are apparently contemplating a move that nobody saw coming, and it involves Anthony Davis. The Dallas Mavericks currently have AD, multiple teams want him, and the Warriors just threw their name into the ring. What happens next could reshape the entire Western Conference landscape completely. Have you ever seen a trade rumor that seemed so crazy you didn't believe it at first, but then realized it actually made sense? Comment below, because the Warriors going after Anthony Davis is one of those situations that sounds insane until you think about it for 5 seconds.
And so with that being said, I was told that Dallas was not that fascinated with what Golden State has on its books. And so if the Golden State Warriors did really want to make a true play at Anthony Davis, they would likely have to acquire some more assets or involve another team.
So Chris Haynes, who's one of the most plugged-in NBA reporters out there, just revealed that the Golden State Warriors are contemplating making a case to acquire Anthony Davis from the Dallas Mavericks. Yes, you read that right. The Warriors, who already have Steph Curry and Draymond Green, are looking at adding Anthony Davis to try and make another championship push. And honestly, the fact that this is even being discussed tells you everything about where both franchises are right now.
So again, with that being said, the Warriors are really trying to figure out ways to assure themselves that they have a real defensive dominant starting center going into the second half of the season to help Stephen Curry and Draymond Green out for a championship push.
Let's start with what Haynes actually reported, because the details matter here. The Warriors have been looking for a big man all season, specifically a rim-running big who can protect the paint and be a lob threat. They need someone who can anchor the defense and give Steph and Draymond the kind of interior presence they haven't had consistently in years. And apparently, they've decided that Anthony Davis fits that description better than anyone else available on the trade market. But here's where it gets complicated. Haynes also reported that Dallas is not that fascinated with what Golden State has on its books. Translation: the Warriors don't have the assets Dallas wants in a straight-up trade. So if Golden State really wants to make this happen, they'd likely have to acquire more assets or involve another team in a 3-team trade scenario. That's not a small obstacle. That's the Warriors having to completely reshape their approach to even get Dallas to take them seriously. Now, before we go any further, let's talk about why Dallas even has Anthony Davis available. AD is currently with the Mavericks, and apparently, multiple teams are interested in trading for him. The Atlanta Hawks are very intrigued, according to Haynes, and they actually have an attractive asset package that could make things interesting. But here's the catch. Any team that acquires Davis needs to be prepared to give him an extension because he only has this season and next season left on his deal, after which he has a player option and could become a free agent. So teams aren't just trading for 2 years of Anthony Davis, they're trading for the right to negotiate an extension with a player who's going to want max money despite his injury history. That's a huge commitment, and it's probably why Dallas is being picky about what they'll accept in return. They're not going to trade a player of AD's caliber for spare parts and future second-round picks. They want real assets.
And so with that being said, if a deal was able to materialize between the Hawks and the Dallas Mavericks, I was told it would not involve Trae Young. Dallas would likely want expiring deals, young assets, and picks, and probably likely to include the #1 pick from last season, Zach Reshape. So with all that being said, the Hawks and Dallas, that is something definitely to monitor looking ahead to the trade deadline.
The Hawks situation is interesting because Haynes specifically mentioned that any deal between Atlanta and Dallas would not involve Trae Young. Dallas apparently wants expiring deals, young assets, picks, and likely would want to include Zachary Reshape, who was the #1 pick in last year's draft. So Dallas is making it clear, if you want Anthony Davis, you're giving up real value. No discount packages. No salary dumps disguised as trades.
That is very interesting. Warriors and inquiring about AD and a potential three-team trade. So let's stick with Golden State. What can you tell us about any other potential moves for them?
Well, Jonathan Kuminga, that's something we've been monitoring all season long. He started off as the starting small forward for the Warriors, had a pretty, good start, got injured, and when he came back, he's been in and out of rotation, and as of late, he's been out of rotation. It's been a very frustrating year for Jonathan Kuminga. There are rival teams out there that believe that once January 15th comes, that's when Jonathan Kuminga can be traded. When that comes, they do not expect Jonathan Kuminga to still be a member of the Golden State Warriors past the trade deadline.
Which brings us back to the Warriors and their problem. What do they have that Dallas would actually want? Jonathan Kuminga is apparently on the trading block. Haynes reported that rival executives expect Kuminga to be traded after January 15th, when he becomes eligible. Kuminga has been in and out of the rotation this season. He's had multiple meetings with Steve Kerr where they haven't been on the same page, and it's been a frustrating year for him. So he's available. But is Kuminga enough to headline a package for Anthony Davis? Probably not. Dallas can get better offers than that from other teams. The Warriors would need to add multiple first-round picks, probably take back salary that Dallas wants to move, and even then they might not have the best offer on the table. That's why Haynes mentioned they'd likely need to involve a third team, someone who has assets that Dallas wants and is willing to facilitate this trade in exchange for getting something from Golden State. Let's talk about why the Warriors even want to do this. They're trying to maximize what's left of Steph Curry's prime. They've already wasted a couple years of his prime with rosters that weren't good enough to seriously contend. Adding Anthony Davis would immediately make them a championship contender again, assuming AD can stay healthy.
Anthony Davis leaves the game on Christmas Day for the Dallas Mavericks. He was running down the court and started grabbing at his groin, immediately walks out of the game, sits down on the bench. Najee Marshall even threw the ball to him in transition, and it went out of bounds. And at this point now,
I'm not a doctor, so I don't know.
I don't exactly know what's going on with Anthony Davis. The Mavericks are calling it groin spasms, but what I do know is that this is one of the reasons why a lot of us have been talking about trading Anthony Davis, why the Mavs have been rumored to trade Anthony Davis, because this is a hamster wheel with him. It's just over and over again. He's out, he's back in, he's injured, he has not played more than 5 games in a row for the Dallas Mavericks ever since he's played. Cooper Flagg has played more games for the Mavericks in his career than Anthony Davis has.
But that's the key phrase, assuming AD can stay healthy. Anthony Davis's injury history is well documented. He's an incredible talent when he's on the court, but keeping him on the court has been a challenge throughout his career. The Warriors would be betting that they can manage his load, keep him healthy for a playoff run, and that having Steph and Draymond around him would make everything easier. That's a big bet to make when you're giving up assets and taking on a massive contract extension. From Dallas's perspective, why would they even consider trading Anthony Davis? Well, if they don't think they can win a championship with their current construction, and if they're worried about AD leaving in free agency after next season, maybe they decide it's better to get value now rather than risk losing him for nothing. But here's what makes this situation wild. The Warriors pursuing AD means they're essentially admitting that their current roster isn't good enough. They won a championship in 2022, but since then they've been bounced from the playoffs early or missed them entirely. They've tried to develop young players like Kuminga and Moses Moody while also trying to compete for championships, and that dual timeline approach hasn't worked. So now they're apparently willing to go all in again, push the chips to the middle of the table, and try to squeeze 1 or 2 more championships out of the Steph Curry era. The potential 3-team trade scenario that Haynes mentioned is fascinating to think about. Who would be the third team? What assets would they contribute? What would they get in return? You could construct like 50 different trade scenarios, and most of them probably wouldn't work because of salary matching issues, luxury tax implications, or teams just saying no. But the fact that the Warriors are willing to explore these complicated multi-team deals shows how serious they are about upgrading their roster. Let's also talk about what this would mean for Anthony Davis. He'd be going from Dallas, where he's probably the second or third option depending on how you view the roster, to Golden State, where he'd be playing alongside Steph Curry and Draymond Green. That's a completely different situation. He'd have more spacing than he's ever had in his career. Steph's gravity would create opportunities for AD that he doesn't currently have. And defensively, having Draymond alongside him would allow AD to play more free safety rather than having to anchor everything by himself. For AD, that could be ideal. He'd be in a system that's proven to win championships. He'd have a point guard who makes everyone around him better. And he'd be in a situation where the pressure is spread out rather than everything being on his shoulders. From a basketball fit perspective, Anthony Davis on the Warriors makes a ton of sense. The question is whether the front offices can make the money and assets work. The Jonathan Kuminga situation is actually really important to all of this. If the Warriors are going to trade for Anthony Davis, Kuminga is almost certainly included in the package. And based on what Haynes reported, Kuminga is frustrated. He's not meshing with Steve Kerr, and the Warriors are apparently ready to move on from him. So this might be addition by subtraction for Golden State. They get rid of a young player who's not working out and bring in a proven star who fits what they need. But from Dallas's perspective, is Kuminga someone they want? He's young, he has potential, but he hasn't put it all together yet. His defense is inconsistent, his shot selection can be questionable, and he's shown that he's not the type of player who's okay coming off the bench. If Dallas trades Anthony Davis, they're probably looking for players and picks that fit their timeline with Luka. Kuminga might not be that guy. That's probably why Haynes emphasized that Golden State would need to involve another team or acquire more assets. Because what they currently have isn't enough to make Dallas say yes. The Warriors would need to either strip their cabinet of future draft picks, or they'd need to bring in a third team that can provide what Dallas actually wants while taking some of Golden State's less desirable assets.
The timing of all this is also significant. Haynes mentioned January 15th as the date when Kuminga becomes trade eligible, and that's typically when the NBA trade market really heats up. Teams have had half a season to evaluate their rosters, they know what they need, and they start making calls to see what's available. The fact that the Warriors are already contemplating a move for Anthony Davis suggests they've seen enough to know their current roster isn't going to cut it. Another factor to consider is the luxury tax implications for all teams involved. The Warriors are already deep into the luxury tax. Adding Anthony Davis's salary would push them even further into the repeater tax, which gets absurdly expensive. The ownership has shown willingness to pay in the past when they think they can win championships, but there's a limit to how much even billionaires want to spend. So the Warriors would need to be absolutely convinced that adding AD puts them over the top. For Dallas, moving AD's contract might actually be about financial flexibility as much as basketball fit. That would explain why they're open to listening to offers rather than just shutting down all trade talk. The Hawks being involved in this is also interesting because it shows that multiple teams see Anthony Davis as potentially available and are making their pitches. Atlanta apparently has an attractive package, and they're not willing to include Trae Young, which means they're offering some combination of other young players, picks, and maybe a veteran or two. That gives Dallas options, which gives them leverage, which makes it harder for the Warriors to get a deal done. This is the kind of situation where you could see 3 or 4 teams all making offers, Dallas weighing the options, and ultimately, nobody getting a deal done because the asking price is too high. Or you could see a surprise team come out of nowhere with an offer that Dallas can't refuse. Trade deadlines are unpredictable like that. The Warriors contemplating a trade for Anthony Davis is one of the wildest storylines of this NBA season. Whether they can actually pull it off depends on assets, money, and whether Dallas thinks what Golden State offers is better than other packages. But the fact that they're even trying shows how desperate they are to maximize Steph's remaining prime. Hit like and subscribe for more NBA trade deadline coverage.